Good morning, this is William Moser, and I'm on Intense News, reporting to you live about a news story that has caught our attention. Today, we talk about human trafficking, which is growing, lucrative crime where people profit from the control and exploitation of others. There are two kinds of human trafficking, but today we focus on the sex trafficking side of it and how it affects its victims. Criminals and the people in this horrendous business are able to take advantage of all types of people through force, fraud, or coercion. Every year, human trafficking generates billions of dollars, and this is why it is a growing industry for criminals. There are many other factors that influence the growth of human trafficking. A common driver of human trafficking is the high demand in the worldwide sex trade. This demand takes advantage of the cultural subordination of women in many societies. These societies view women as an economic burden and tolerate the selling of daughters and acceptance of prostitution as an employment outlet. Many women who wind up as trafficking victims were usually abused earlier in their lives, often by a family member or a spouse. This is what makes the victim so vulnerable to the traffickers' feigned affection and false protection. Also, the repeated rapes that captive prostitutes endure can turn someone with low self-esteem into someone with a serious psychiatric illness. Many suffer from psychiatric disorders such as severe dissociative identity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and bipolar disorder. Additionally, trafficking victims usually are profoundly ashamed of what they have been doing or believe that they have failed, disappointing the families who depend on them for survival. Like battered spouses, they often return to their abusers. Many have no other way to make a living, and this prevents victims from breaking this vicious cycle. Sex trafficking victims also widely believe that if they talk, they or a loved one will be killed. Their fear is not unfounded, since the extent of the trafficking rings reach back into the girls' hometowns, and local law enforcement is complicit in the sex trade. A lot of these children never want to see their parents ever again for a while because they are ashamed to explain what has happened. Now, we send it over to Edward Ozer with his social ethical analysis.
Thank you for that introduction, William. My name is Edward Oser, and I'm here to give a social ethical analysis of the situation. I think that Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative of the formula of end in itself is very prevalent in human trafficking. Criminals have control over others and use the victims as objects for sex and labor and do not treat them as a human being. Everyone has value as a human, and people cannot just disregard that and use people for pleasure. People must be valued as a whole for their intrinsic worth, especially in this situation. The Catholic social teaching principle for the poor and vulnerable also applies to this atrocity. Those who are poor and in third world countries are more likely to fall victim to this crime. Preferential protection must move toward those affected by the absence of power, because to work towards the common good of all of the society, there must be a balance, to help those who are poor as well. Even after they get out, victims need help from different charities and organizations to give them somewhere they can go after they are rescued from their ordeals so that they can start a new life and be successful. Another Catholic social teaching is the principle for the common good. There has to be better institutions and stronger governments that promote the well-being of others and allows the realization of every human being's human dignity. Especially with the victims of human trafficking, those affected need more help than anyone else. Governments and police need to be changed so that there is no corruption that allows the victims to be subjugated to a crime like this. There needs to be more organization so that the victims have help after being in this horrible lifestyle so that they can get back to a life of normalcy and try success that everyone deserves. The cycle of socialization allows human trafficking to trap its victims. Those who are poor are those who come from bad backgrounds or are placed in lower lights by society. Society rejects them and puts stereotypes on them, making them feel worthless. They in turn end up in human trafficking because they have found someone who cares about them or a better way of life. But in reality, they have put themselves into the human trafficking network. Society continues this cycle of oppression, never allowing the young people in this class of poverty to get out or try and be successful. The cycle of socialization needs to stop so that the victims are no longer victims and this crime can be on its way to extinction. Lastly, the combination of principle of human life and human dignity of the Catholic social teaching applies here. Human trafficking, like I said before, makes people objects. But in doing so, this heinous crime takes away people's intrinsic worth and value and takes away what makes them human. Victims are dehumanized. In no way, shape, or form do they deserve to be treated like this, and they have a right to live as a human and not as the slave or an object. They also have the right to dignity, which everyone has from birth until death. Everyone is created to look like God, so to put one group of individuals or even one single person over another like the situation with the victims, is wrong, and the principles should be upheld. Now we send it over to Lizzie Oster, who is on the streets live, interviewing those who have comments on this situation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. Now I'm here with Molly for her thoughts on the situation.
I think human trafficking is morally wrong. People are treated as slaves. They become objects and they're totally traumatized and their rights are taken away. And it's hard to get out of the slave trade once you're in it. Slavery is morally wrong, and when the people have a hard time getting out of the slave trade, and when they do get out, they have a hard time getting back to society because they're so traumatized. I think the government should be more aware of this, and I think they should start organizations to help rehabilitate these people and make their lives better.
Thank you for that. Now back to you, Edward.
Thank you for that, Lizzie. And I'm here today to give my perspective on this growing problem. Human trafficking, as we all know, is one of the worst crimes in the world and one of the fastest growing. The reality for those who are victimized is sometimes a ruined life. Even after the victims escape, which is unlikely, they are scared for their life and most of the time cannot come back and just lead a normal life. Because of this crime and its growth, there is a lot of cooperation from local government and police, and this is how it is able to thrive. People also need to be made more aware of how big a problem this really is and the harsh realities for those who face it. The victims are not just physically hurt. They are mentally and emotionally attacked through the repetitive cycle of this trade and the atrocities that are committed during it. Everyone on this planet has a right to help and protect those who cannot fight for themselves, and in this instance, it is to help the victims of human trafficking. Their fight and struggle goes unnoticed, and it is why people suffer so much. There needs to be more help from the organizations to help and get the victims back on their feet after the ordeals. Anyways, thank you for watching Intense News today, and we'll see you tomorrow.